From the Ticats Audio Network, this is Ticats Today with Louie B.
Yes, it is Ticats Today for a Monday, November the 8th, 2021. And a bittersweet day for us here on Ticats Today as we remember the life of Angelo Mosca, who passed away over the weekend. So we will get back to regularly scheduled programming on this program tomorrow. But today we've decided to dedicate the entire show to Angelo Mosca. We'll be joined by Scott Mitchell, president of the Hamilton Tiger Cats. We'll be joined by Shawn Burke, senior director and co-manager of football operations. Steve Milton will be by, and we'll hear from Angelo Mosca himself on an interview we found in the Ticats archive. So lots coming up on today's show. No news from practice. The Ticats were back on the practice field. We'll get to all that stuff tomorrow because today entirely dedicated to Angelo Mosca, who passed away Saturday morning at the age of 84. Just a little quick bio here. For those of you who I'm sure already know, but Mosca was a 5-time Grey Cup champion, his Canadian Football Hall of Fame career, 4 with Hamilton, 1 with the Ottawa Rough Riders, and he shares the CFL record of 9 Grey Cup appearances with 5 other players. He was a 2-time CFL All-Star, a 5-time Divisional All-Star. He played in 201 career games with the Tiger Cats, and he made 19 total of appearances in the postseason with Hamilton, 4 with Ottawa. He was a University of Notre Dame product who played both offensive and defensive tackle, middle guard, and end throughout his career. Was enshrined in the Canadian Football Hall of Fame in 1987, the Hamilton Sports Hall of Fame in 2012, and in 2015, the Ticats retired Mosca's jersey number 68, and he joined Bernie Filoni, who had his number 10 retired by the team in 1999, as the only players in the 152-year history of the organization to have their numbers retired. In a statement, the team said Angelo Mosca was a legend. He was one of the most legendary players in CFL history and certainly the most legendary to ever wear a Tiger Cat uniform. His contributions to the game of Canadian football, to our organization, and to the Hamilton community will never be forgotten. We send our sincere condolences to Angelo's entire family. So obviously it is a tough day within the organization today. Of course, practice was played. Football was played today, as I'm sure Angelo Mosca would have wanted it to happen, but definitely kind of a bit of a despite the beautiful day, a bit of a cloud over Tim Hortons Field today. But we are celebrating the life of King Kong Mosca, and who better to do that with than with Scott Mitchell, the president of the Hamilton Tiger Cats. And Scott, as mentioned, it's a bit of a bittersweet day, and that we have to say goodbye to a legend, but get to celebrate the life he lived.
Well, we've done a lot of celebrating with Angelo and his family through the years, and very appreciative of the great moments we've had together. And obviously, as you said, very melancholy this weekend and today. But I know it's been a tough few months for Angelo, and I think talking to Angelo Jr., it's been tough since the pandemic. Obviously, a lot of us who spent a lot of time with Angelo previously hadn't been able to see him since the pandemic, and that makes it really hard not to have had that chance. But we're as always, we're gonna do a fantastic job working with Angelo and his family to make sure that Angelo celebrated properly and in a very classy fashion. Really is of proper salutation to Angelo Mosca, the one and only.
You had a very good personal relationship with Angelo, more than Angelo Mosca, Hamilton Tiger Cat, but Angelo Mosca, the person. When you think back of your time with him, what stands out to you?
Well, there's a number of things. For whatever reason, Angelo and my father got along really well, and I say that because Angelo did not like commissioners. He made it very clear he didn't like the commissioners. He particularly didn't like commissioners that didn't listen to him. And so he and my father had hit it off a long time ago, and maybe that had been a bit of the former player in my dad that got along so well with Angelo. But when we came in, for whatever reason, Angelo had not been a big part of the organization. And, these things happen for different reasons, but it was pretty clear and obvious that Angelo needed to be a big part of the organization, a big part of the franchise. And the organization at that time really hadn't had a lot of success in recent years. And I think we all thought it was very important to bring back that face of the franchise and establish ourselves back with that persona of Angelo, of playing tough physical football and leaning on him to provide his persona and aura to the organization in all sorts of different ways. So, I feel very, very fortunate to have spent as much time as we did with Angelo. A lot of us here did. It was awesome to spend a lot of time with him. He had some incredible stories. He had an incredible sense of humor. He lived an incredible life, and I'm using incredible too many times, but that's the truth. And I think for me personally, the most poignant moment was when I drove down to see him a couple of months, I guess, before we retired his number, and I sat down, had lunch with he and his wife Helen down in St. Catharines, and I knew it would be important to Angelo, but of course he'd had so many honors throughout his career and his life in any number of different fashions of his life or facets of his life. But he was extremely, extremely emotional, and he got me emotional, and Helen was emotional, and it was a really, really wonderful day, and it was a beautiful day, a little bit like it is today, to be honest with you. And he had a beautiful spot there on the lake, and we just had a wonderful day talking about it. And then the day of the ceremony itself really was fantastic. Talking to Ange Jr. earlier today, we were talking about the fact that we weren't sure how it was going to go, because Ange at that time, he was still doing great, but it was getting a little more challenging. But like the true showman and performer he pulled it off. He was outstanding, and it was a great night. I don't think any of us will ever forget the fireworks going off in the end. And we got some great pictures of Angelo Jr. and his dad together, and those were great moments.
And I mean, to that point, earlier today, I was kind of just walking around the stadium, and you can't go a couple of feet without being reminded of something, Angelo, whether it's, the flag, the retired number with Bernie over there, or the Mosca on the wall, or pictures everywhere. It doesn't seem fitting, but there's a word there that with the Grey Cup here, to get to celebrate this all within the next few weeks, because he was so Hamilton, and to get to celebrate this game in Hamilton, it feels like it's going to be even extra special now.
Well, I think that's right. And again, I'd go back to the fact that Ange was a great player, but Ange was also an incredible performer. And Ange loved the spotlight, and Ange loved the big moments. There's no question about that. So for us to have the Grey Cup back in Hamilton this year, and to be able to celebrate that path to the Grey Cup and be Angelo a big part of that, I think it's very apropos, and he will always be a big part of this organization and this city. I think that's the way it should be, Louis. You shouldn't be able to go too far without seeing Angelo some way, shape, or form. And we've done a number of things with him to make sure that he knew that his legacy was always going to live on forever. And I think whether it be the young kids he's touched, they're still young kids or growing into being teenagers or adolescents now, to all the players that have come through, the present players, but of course, I've seen so many notes from former players who now are into their 30s and 40s who had an unbelievable interaction and a great experience with Angelo. So he may be gone in a physical form, but he will never be forgotten, and he truly was a legend and one of a kind.
Scott, I appreciate you spending some time with me to reflect on the life and legacy of Mr. Mosca. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Louis. Appreciate it.
That is the president of the Hamilton Ticats, Scott Mitchell. And, little quick story here, and he talked about 2015, and we'll get into that a bit more when Shawn Burke joins us in just a second. But a little personal story, even lately, that I had with King Kong. Obviously, 2015 was such a magical day, but I was playing softball this season, and first time I'd played softball in a couple of years, and playing with an old friend from high school, and didn't really know many of the guys kind of on the team. Friends of friends type thing, but there was one name that stood out, and it was Nathan Mosca. So I saw Mosca and Ticats, and I wanted to ask him, but I didn't. And so eventually, he kept asking me Ticats questions, and I was just like, there's no way. Of course, Nathan Mosca was Angelo's grandson, and a very red-faced Louis B, who works for the Ticats, wasn't able to put 2 and 2 together quickly, but Nathan, just like his grandpa, is a fantastic guy, and I'm thinking of him and his family members as obviously tough to say goodbye to a grandparent. So thoughts and prayers go out to Nathan and his family, and of course Ange's entire family and circle of friends. But let's continue tributes here, and very pleased now to be joined by the Senior Director of Player Personnel and Co-Manager of Football Operations for the Hamilton Ticats, Shawn Burke. And Burkey, I know you're very close to King Kong, to Angelo Mosca, so just kind of get your reflection on the past few days here for you.
Yeah, when I started reading it on Twitter, it really hit home. There's always a few guys that you get to know pretty well in this profession, and fortunately for me, Ange was one. When I first came on board in previous lifetime in community relations, he was one of our community ambassadors, and got to spend a lot of time and struck up a friendship. And I know the last few years have been tougher on Ange and his family, but the spirit of 68 has always been a part of myself, and I know our organization. There was no one held in more higher regard by Bob, Scott, myself, Orlando, everyone than Ange.
And we were talking about this with Coach today, and even Simone, and it just comes up that, he is Hamilton football. Like, when you think of the way this team is built even today, and the way this organization operates, it operates with passion, but it operates with hard work, and it's not cliche to say you put on your hard hat, you bring your lunch pail, and you go to work. And Ange did all those things, didn't he?
Yeah, he really took to Hamilton, and it embodies, I believe, our community here of, we're a hardworking community that family orientated and believes in doing things for everyone around us. So, Ange was like that. He had a passion for our organization. He had a passion for our players, and our players knowing how important the Tiger Cats were to our community. But he definitely embodies it. There's guys, I would say, that play the same way on that edge that Ange did, that are on our roster, and sometimes you have to rein them back a bit. And I'm sure the coaches, Coach Sazio, back in the day, had to do that with Ange as well. And sometimes that's good, and sometimes it's bad. But it's the passion for the football that I see our roster have, that it comes on the greatness before us, and we do a great job, Coach O and his staff, of examining that greatness of previous eras of Ticat football. And Ange is at the forefront. If you're talking about throwing out that logo on Twitter and say one name that associates with the Tiger Cats, it'd be Angelo Mosca.
Well said. And what did it mean to have him around, even in the last few years, to see, in 2015, the amazing ceremony to honor him. But, up until 2019, I can still remember him being at some practices here back in 2019. What do you think it meant to the guys to see that this living legend was here? His number's retired. His bust's in the Hall of Fame. What do you think it meant to players to see him, even up until last season?
Yeah, I think anyone that's been around Ange would say he's larger than life, both literally and figuratively. And some people just command that aura about them when you're in their presence, and he certainly did that. So, even the new guys that would come in wouldn't know his story or how great he was or whatever, but you looked over and the respect he was given by everyone A to Z in the organization. They knew this was a guy that, means something, and he could engage in conversations, and he was just great at knowing the pulse of everyone around him. And I said yesterday to another outlet about one thing that isn't talked about enough is Ange picked up his phone constantly for teammates. He never forgot about them. He picked up his phone for people in the organization on the business side. Sorry, getting a little emotional. On the football side, everyone. He was great at checking in on everyone and making sure that they knew that he cared about them. So everyone, if it was a guy's first day or they're being here for 5 years, just rallied around Ange and wanted to hear what he had to say.
And it's something that Coach O had mentioned was that, even if you didn't get to the call, he'd leave you a voicemail. And I'm sure you got a couple of saved voicemails from Ange that you'll be able to go back and hear. But the last few days, I'm sure there's been a lot of stories that have gone through your head, a lot of good times. What's one that you keep coming back to in these last 2 days that maybe embodies who he was, what he meant to the city, the last, in your time getting to work with him?
I'm not sure I could share all the stories. I got a real deep glimpse into Ange because we spent a lot of time together, but I would say just the car rides with them, just driving to and from events. And, when I transitioned more on to the football side and then exclusively on the football side, it was just the calls, checking in. Helen, his wife, and Ange Jr. and some of his friends, Joe, they were very special people that made sure Ange stayed involved with us. And I was part of that inner group that got to spend some time with them at luncheons at an Italian club in town here several times. And I'll never forget them. It's just sitting beside him and him, treating you like you were the royalty. And he was bragging about me that I was his friends to his friends there. And meanwhile, I'm in awe sitting beside Angelo Mosca, hearing him just talk about the old days. But just the time spent together. He was the Ticat historian for me, Hamilton historian. Some good things I learned, some bad things I learned, and some very dangerous things I learned, but all of them were priceless memories. And, I grew up being a wrestling fan and getting to hear some wrestling stories from him and some Boston stories and just anything and everything. But I think what's lost sometimes is everyone talks about Ange, the football player, but Ange, the family guy, the love he had, talk about his family, his grandkids, his kids, obviously Helen, but the love he had for them, he shared with me just as much as the team in the league. But he just loved Canada, loved Hamilton, and loved the CFL.
Bergie, I know for how important of a part he was to this organization. I think more important than that, he was a great friend to you. So my condolences. And, obviously it's a sad day in this organization, but a celebration of a life very certainly well lived for number 68 forever.
Absolutely. Thanks, Louis.
That is the Senior Director of Player Personnel and Co-Manager of Football Operations for the Ticats, Shawn Burke. And as we continue our tribute here today on a very special Ticats Today, remembering Angelo Mosca, very pleased to be joined now by the man who literally wrote the book on Angelo Mosca, wrote it, I should say, if I knew how to co-speak English. Steve Milton from the Hamilton Spectator, co-wrote the book, Tell Me to My Face. It was the autobiography released by Angelo Mosca. And Milty, I want to put you on the spot here because I want to know, do you remember the first time you ever met Angelo Mosca?
I don't know that I can remember that. I think it was a presence. He was away a lot, and I was away a lot when I first came to Hamilton because I was traveling with the Blue Jays for 10 years. And so I think I ran into him at a game in '86 in the fall, and he would have been, I think, maybe still on the road himself in those years. And it was sort of like, so this is Mosca. And of course, I grew up, this is going to be awful for people in your group to hear that I grew up an Argo fan because I grew up in Toronto. And so, of course, Mosca was a guy that you essentially detested. And I didn't have that because I'd been a sports writer for a long time. So you got into, the objectivity of that. But I remember that, and I remember his size, and I remember his face. Exaggerated features. Everything about Angelo was oversized, and I remember that. And of course, we saw each other a lot over the years, and I wrote about him, particularly from the mid '90s on, little bits here and there. And then we became quite close just prior to him deciding that he would write a book for Bob Young's company, Lulu.ca at the time, and they decided that I should work with him on that. And that would be, I think that was sort of late 2010. We did that around Christmas 2010, and we worked on it through the early part of 2011.
I mean, the stories, I mean, you would obviously heard the stories, but to actually get that intimate one-on-one time with him and to hear a little bit more behind the stories. I mean, what was that experience like? Like I mean, writing a book with this guy who has so many, like, how did you even put it all together?
Well, for one thing, it's hard to, like, I found this when I wrote his obituary, one of his obituaries in the Spectator, that wasn't long enough. I felt the book wasn't long enough either. I really couldn't get into as much, particularly off the wrestling. I wasn't around there. Wrestling doesn't have a lot of records you can sort of get a lot of the stories from. They promote what they want to promote. And so it was overwhelming in a way, if you want to know the truth. I've done it before. I mean, it's not, I've done other books, and I was working on one concurrently with Tessa and Scott, who had just won their first Olympics. So, it was quite a contrast, as you can imagine, between those two books. And so, but the intensity of both his funness and it was a lot of fun doing it, but it was also extremely intense because it was at the time he decided he needed to reveal some things to people that he kept secret for a long, long time. And this was the vehicle that he was going to do. His family had already known about it, about certain things. And this was, he thought, in a way it was a bit of a form of, and I don't want to say therapy because that's not what it was, but it was cathartic, I think, for him. I was encouraged very, very heavily by his wife, Helen, who was a marvelous person. And it stunned me a couple of times. He said, "I'm going to knock you off your feet." And I go, "Right, I've heard this before." And I did. When he first told me this one thing, we did a little bit at the start. And then he said, "Okay, let's start at the start." And I said, "Let's start at the start. Let's do this chronologically, and we'll figure out how the book will go after that, whether we'll write a chronological book," which we sort of did. Yeah. And then when he said, "It's going to freak you out," and I went, "All right," as if I slipped. I can remember it. He started to talk about this, and I shifted my balance on these big chairs he had in this beautiful home in St. Catharines, and I ended up sliding right off the stool because I was so not concentrating on anything except what. Yeah. That kind of thing. So
he grew
and
up.
I've heard a lot in my time.
I mean, he grew up on the mean streets of Boston. Like, it's one thing.
Yeah, outside of Boston, yes.
Outside of Boston,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing, you hear that so cliched, mean streets of Boston or just outside of Boston. And so I've been watching interviews of him in past, and I mean, he never lost that Boston accent. Right?
No.
And it was.
And when he get mad or emotional, it really came out.
Yeah. And I mean, to that point, he was almost a perfect transplant for Hamilton. And yeah. Hamilton had its own sports stars before, right? Homegrown stars. But looking back on it now, do you kind of look at, I mean, we've seen Ticats do this too. And I go to Simone Lawrence. Simone Lawrence will always be a Hamilton Tiger Cat.
Yeah.
I mean, he was almost the first adopted son of Hamilton.
Well, there were a couple, but yeah, you're right. I mean, there were a couple in there, and he made it longer than anybody else in terms of, his, and it's odd that he's so, it's not odd, but remember, he didn't live here all that much. I mean, he lived in Caledon because when he was wrestling, because it was right by the airport and he was always traveling, and he lived in St. Catharines in his latter years, or I suppose that's technically Niagara on the Lake, down where his beautiful home, right on the canal, right where the canal starts, and fantastic spot. But he was in Hamilton every single day. That he was not on the road, like he was here all the time, and nobody's ever been. I don't think, Louis, as you say from outside, as identified as strongly with this city as he was. And I'm talking at any level. Musicians, even some of our top musicians, haven't been as strongly identified. When you say Hamilton, Angelo Mosca, you say Angelo Mosca, you say Hamilton. And in there, the Tiger Cats weaving through all of this. He arrived here at exactly the right time as the team was peaking. They'd won a couple of Grey Cups. They'd won in 57. They started that first, all those strings against Winnipeg. There was a million of them between 57 and the mid 60s. But it was really Hamilton against Winnipeg almost every year in the Grey Cup. And he came in for the second one of those. And he combined with Barrow to give this team an identity, but he ascended and superseded Barrow by a long shot because of the manner in which he played. And that was only enhanced by the 1963 incident with Willie Fleming.
So when you mentioned 58, I mean, then he goes to Ottawa, then he goes to Montreal. Was it always imperative that he was going to come back? Like when you talked about him coming, like when you got to that part of the book, like, drafted by Hamilton, I know that was the newly hired coach from the Eagles who came in, who had drafted, who had gotten Angelo into.
You're talking Jim Trimble. Yeah.
Jim Trimble. Yeah. And so was it always imperative that he was going to come back, or was it ever in doubt? I'm sorry.
It was imperative that they wanted him back. And they told him before they traded him that they were going to, but they couldn't. Look, it's in the book, so I'm not going to pull any punches here. He was a wild guy. All right, he was a wild guy, and he was young, and he was feeling his Cheerios, and he was big, and he was handsome, and he was extraordinarily athletic. I mean, they always listed him at 290, but he was always 300. He had the trainer tell the media guys and not that there were any real media guys, but to tell the media that he was 290 because 300 pounders were thought to be kind of slow and big and all that kind of thing. He was anything but he had small man speed. I can remember that. I can remember him chasing down people like Dick Shadow of the Argos and that kind of thing, like chasing them all over the field. This massive guy. And so he changed. And of course, there was a real element of toughness, straddling the line of legality lots of times, but rules were different then too. He did this. He made sort of famous in the CFL, the head slap, which is now banned. But it was a big thing, and he made it popular. I don't know if he was the first to do it. I doubt if he was, but head slap this, and then you do the swim move, which move a guy's around. And you couldn't stop him. He was so big and so fast.
The clothesline. I mean, I know you talked about that. The horse collar. I mean, there's a lot of things.
All of those things were illegal.
And he's admitted it, though, too. He's admitted that he wouldn't have been able to play in today's game. I mean, I'm sure he would have adjusted, but, I mean, he would have gotten a lot of fines, I think.
Well, he would have. And Angelo, look, he was a survivor. And when you read his story, particularly the first part of that story, which was important, and I never knew any of this stuff. And most people didn't. I think it's maybe his closest friends, but none of his closest friends knew about his race, right? About that he was biracial, and that he had been forced to hide it, and out of shame by his father, because his mother essentially was what in those days was called mulatto, which meant that she had an African American mother, and his brother and several others in the family do look African American. And when you know it about Angelo, this is him talking, not me. Say, look at my face. Now that you know that, can you see certain features? And yes, once you know. And if you want to put it that way, those are his words, not mine.
Yeah. No. And I mean, it's such a huge part of who he is. Right. And especially coming up here for Hamilton, when you think of like, is there a particular event? Is there a particular story that basically encompasses who Angelo was that jumps out at you? I mean, there's so many, like you said, you've been through his life with a fine tooth comb and gotten experiences that very few people got. Is there one thing? There are a few things that stick out to you well,
a few things, I think, because he's a man of many contrasts. And of course, as I was writing the spec earlier this week, that, and it's in the book, this line, Angelo didn't do small, right? Didn't do small in any way. And so everything about him was a bit oversized, outsized. And so even some of, like, he did some stuff that he very much regretted, but there were some things that he did that, like his father ran illegal card games, and he'd employ Angelo to sell sandwiches and collect the money and pop and beer in those games. They'd move from garage to garage. Angelo didn't know why they kept moving, but of course it's because the cops would find out. Well, Angelo did that himself here, and he freely admitted that in the book into his 60s. And Hamilton was crazy for that. Back in the when he arrived here in the 50s and early 60s, there was lots of what they in those days called booze cans, after hours card games. He ran some of those games. So that's one of the reasons he got traded, of course, because the Trimble got tired of kind of being called in the middle of the night, and again, I'm not saying anything that Angelo didn't say. This was in his book. Yeah. He freely admitted, and Trimble at the time said, look, we'll probably try to get you back, but we have right now it's a distraction. And they did get him back, and he almost deliberately got him cut. He never played for Montreal. He just practiced with him in training camp and got himself, according to his story, essentially he didn't like playing in Ottawa. I found the team a little bit too slick. Not his kind of guys. Very earthy kind of guy. That's his memory of it. And so he ended up over in Montreal, and then he deliberately, I think, got cut from Montreal so he could come back to Hamilton. But before he even got cut, he called Ticats and said, watch it. I think I'm going to be available shortly. And he came back.
Yeah.
And boy, and that started that period of the 60s, culminating in two things. I think the greatest team still to this point, it wouldn't have been had the Ticats won the Grey Cup last year. The 67 Grey Cup team, the greatest Ticat team ever. Again, because the Ticats didn't win last year or in 2019. And then the 72 was, the last time the Grey Cup was played here, and they won. Yeah. And there's no more. I mean, there's probably a half a dozen photographs that the Spectator has that and I'm talking over 175 years here now. Yeah. And define the city. Yeah. And that is one of them. Henley and Mosca from behind, holding up the Grey Cup, peering down to the crowd at Ivor Wynne Stadium. Everybody who was alive then in this area knows that picture.
I spent a couple of minutes here, before Ticats practice, just kind of going around the stadium, and I stopped by his flag. Of course, one of only two players to have their number retired in the entire franchise history of the
close friends.
Yep, Bernie Filoni hanging right next side to him. I went to his bus down on the 4th floor. I went down, obviously saw that picture down on the 3rd floor as well, and to wrap it up here, he was a fighter in every sense of the word, and never more so than kind of these last few years. And we saw him fight right to the very end. We saw him coming down here up until 2019. He still was making appearances here.
Yes, with Alzheimer's. And
yes. Leave, to kind of leave with the final thought here. And I encourage everyone to pick up the book if you haven't already, or if you have picked it up, pick it up again. Because he was a fighter in every sense of the word.
Yes, he prevailed.
He prevailed.
Survived, and he had to survive. What he did to learn to survive, and I really encourage people to have a look at that, and what he did and what had to do early in his life to essentially survive was quite amazing. And I don't think we got everything in there. I don't know that we have everything that he had to do. I think some of it might have even been too painful to put in there. And that puts Angelo Mosca in an entirely different light when you see that. Angelo Mosca that we know, the public one, and the public one is the real one as well. Mm-hmm. Believe me. I mean, he was right out there. He was pretty blunt, but it really gives you sort of like everybody's life is a story, and Angelo's life is a huge story. It's really, it is a novel in my mind.
Well, it's a biography, and you co-wrote it. Tell Me to My Face. It's a great read for any Ticats fan, any football fan, any wrestling fan. Milty, I appreciate the time. I know you're a busy guy, but thank you so much for coming on, helping reflect on the life of Mr. Mosca.
Okay, thanks for having me on, Lewis. Appreciate it.
My thanks to Steve Milton for joining me today. I know he has been very busy. Fantastic tribute in the Hamilton Spectator today to Angelo Mosca, and I want to finish off here with Mosca in his own words. When digging through the archives to try and find some interviews, of course, we all know the famous Grey Cup interview. I can't believe it's taken us this long to actually bring that up in this forum. But I think it's because all of us here at the Ticats knew he was so much better, so much bigger, so much more than a viral clip. Pre-internet too. That was pre-Twitter almost. But that clip, of course, will live in infamy, much like Mr. Mosca himself. And we'll wrap up the show here with a little bit of Angelo Mosca in his own words. Thanks so much for tuning in. We appreciate it. We are back tomorrow, same time, same place. But this has been a very special edition of Ticats Today, remembering Angelo Mosca. And as we go out, here is Mr. Mosca, his journey to the Canadian Football League, in his own words.
My parents really didn't want me to play football. Can you believe this big Hulk worried about me getting hurt? I'm a very lucky guy that sports probably saved my life. There's two of my best friends, so-called best friends. They haven't seen the street in over 50 years. Their life is in prison. So sports has saved my life. I'm from the north end of Boston, kind of a tough area, but I didn't look at it that way. Sports was a good part of my life. We're before Little Leagues, but we just didn't. And we were kids that wound up going to Fenway Park and sold hot dogs, and Ted Williams was my idol at that time. And that's how us kids got along in life. And it was a fun part of every day, 15, 16 years old, just going and playing sports. I had over 60 different scholarships to go to different universities. See, I was a real big kid. I was ahead of my time. I was lifting weights when I was 16. Dumbbells, the ones that you put off and on yourself. And I can remember reading Mighty Atlas was the thing of lifting weights and make you strong. And I wind up being strong. And like I said, the scholarship offers came in galore. And I was around the Boston area where there was Holy Cross, Boston College, and Boston University. But I wound up going to Notre Dame, was the bigger name school. And I was a big kid. I was a kid that weighed 255, 260 pounds in those days. And I was very physical. And we were taught to be physical. My high school coach's name was Tony Zulo. The name Zulo's tough. He was 5'9", weighed about 290. So just picture that. And he'd bust you in the nose and stuff, make you bleed, and he'd get you mad. But that's the way we were taught to play the game in those days. And I played before face masks. See, what a pretty face, huh? Yeah, it was tough, but it was good. It was fun. We enjoyed it. Sick, aren't we? It was an all-boys school, Notre Dame was. When I got there, it didn't become a co-ed school in 1976. Of course, I was there in the late 50s. Well, I was running crap games and card games in college to make a few extra dollars.
So is that why you lost your scholarship?
Well, that's why. And then I wound up getting married, too. That killed me, too. You're not supposed to be married at Notre Dame. And I got married. Bad boy. Well, that's the way it was from the north end of Boston. You did things according to survive. And that was a moment of survival. That's what it was for me. But I have no complaints about it. I'd do it all over again. No regrets. And I had one more year of college to go. And I knew nothing about Canada. And in my era in time, we didn't have agents. But Notre Dame had a fellow named Julius Tucker, who was a big businessman in South Bend, Indiana. He always looked after us football players who wanted to go somewhere. And all of a sudden, I get an offer from Canada. I didn't know where Hamilton, Ontario was. I knew nothing about this country. And Jim Trimble was the head coach here, and he got fired by the Philadelphia Eagles. And he came to Canada to coach. And that's who I was drafted by, the Philadelphia Eagles. And I wind up coming here, playing here. And at that time, they only kept 11 Americans. Yeah, so competition was tough because when I got here, they had just come off of the 57 championship team in the Grey Cup. So that was tough. Lucky I made the team. I don't know if I was lucky, but I was very physical. That's how it come. And then in my era and time, I see stuff that goes on today. I'd probably be thrown in jail. clotheslining guys, head slapping people. That was all legal. And it was right down my alley. Yeah, I was known for it, and I was very physical, and I could handle it, and it didn't bother me at all. I enjoyed the physical part of it very much. You can't, a horse collar, they call it, drag a guy down from behind. You can't spear with your head. That was one of my favorite ones. Football was made to be rough, and that's the way coaches wanted it to be. But as time progressed, more and more rules entered the game.
Ticats Today with Louie B. Subscribe, like, and get your Ticats fix every weekday.